Good morning. Good morning. This is House Government Operations and Military Affairs on Thursday, March 20th, and we are discussing our miscellaneous elections bill, H 474. And we are hearing an amendment from Representative Laura Sibilia today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I am here with an amendment to your bill to add a section to your bill, which is to move the independent candidate filing deadline to 2 weeks after the primaries. And I apologize, I have not prepared my testimony, or I would have something written for you. I believe it is 40% of Americans consider themselves to be independents. And elections are for voters. They're not for the parties. The parties organize candidates for the elections. Those of you who were a part of this committee in the last biennium may recall I was pretty deeply opposed to the sore loser aspect of the miscellaneous elections bill, which I see is included but called something else in this bill this year. I do not agree with that. I think you should be able to run as an independent. However, I think if we create a situation where we say that you stay out of the party primaries and you don't like what the parties provide in terms of options for the voters, we have an opportunity for an independent to step in. I think that's in service to the voters, and I think it is. It's not everything that I would like, but I think it would be helpful and in service to the voters. So it's a small little amendment, doesn't strike anything from your bill. It's an addition to your bill.
So people were having trouble finding your amendment. It is
in the calendar
right now also on our webpage under H 474 draft 1.2. But
Madam Chair,
I would like, yes.
I know that there was discussion happening with the Secretary of State around the timing of this. And how much time would be necessary in order to get ballots ready. I think that it seems like 2 weeks should be fine, but I think I can speak on behalf of the 4 independent co-sponsors of this and say that if there is a date after the primary that makes more sense, we would be happy to amend this. Support it.
Thank you very much, because the Secretary of State's office is here and we'll speak to that. So we'll ask them that question. We really appreciate your flexibility.
Yes, and I do think that it is imperative that we provide this opportunity after the party primaries for the voters to look at what the parties have done and the voters to say, no. We want something forward. Again, I would like someone who's running the party primaries to be able to do that. That is not what this does. So, can I be of further assistance, Madam Chair?
Any additional questions for Representative Sibilia? Yes. Thank you.
You'd like to stay, but we have really important testimony. So if I can be of further assistance, please let me know.
I will let you know if we have any additional questions. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, so that will be posted under Rep. Sibilia's name in a few minutes, now that we're done looking at the document, because I think it's important to understand who brought it to us. Now, next on our agenda, which I've just exited out of for whatever reason, We were going to hear from Director of Elections and Campaign Finance. Sean, would you like to join us and introduce yourself again?
Sean Sheehan, Director of Elections at the Secretary of State's office. Thank you for having me here on the topic of the independent filing date is my understanding. They say a picture tells 1,000 words. When you have an hour to pull together a picture, maybe only worth a couple hundred words. I did send over, we are sending over the for the site. It may not be over yet. I just hit print and hit PDF and ran up the hill, so I may have beat the thumbs up, but it will be coming. But I like I said, I ran printouts for this as well. I think and I'm happy to talk through the items on here. I tried to highlight the two most relevant dates. This is what our August looks like at the Secretary of State's office, the Elections Division. Again, as a reminder, our team is just myself and 5 other people. So when there's a crunch time, we're out flat. And probably that August, right after the time right after the August primary, those 2-3 weeks after, is arguably our biggest crunch time at all period of the whole year, even more than at the primary, general election, and so forth, just to show what's going on. The time right before the primary election is actually a little bit of the calm before the storm for us, at least. It is very busy for town and city clerks, but we've done our work getting out the primary ballots, doing our trainings with the clerks. We're certainly getting a lot of questions, phone calls, emails from clerks as people come in. But a lot of those early voting questions have kind of cleared by July. And in that sense, having the filing deadlines in early August is really the perfect timing right now. Sorry, absolutely.
I just need to clarify something. I'm really sorry for you.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
The orange represents the clerk's time.
No, sorry. The orange on here is projects that's largely the orange. It doesn't differentiate between our staff and clerks. It's just work that's going on at that time. To go through for a high level, maybe I should just speak. A lot of those first 5 or 6 rows are much more on the clerk's side at that point. They're testing their tabulators together with the vendor to make sure those the non-hand count towns, the towns that use tabulators, are testing their tabulators to make sure they work. Early voting, happens 45 days before the election, but it's continuing right up. Ballots are being delivered by justice of the peace to voters with the disabilities and the elderly who request them. The clerks and BCA are coordinating that. Those towns that have voted to process the ballots, again, not count them or count any results as we've spoken about, but just to feed them into the tabulators. They're doing that work throughout July and early August. And then where there's defective ballots, those being the cases of somebody who returned an early ballot but didn't sign the back of their envelope, the clerks are reaching out, trying to contact those voters to cure their defective ballots. On our side, we do a lot of the pieces we don't have on here, just a lot of the training and a lot of the support for the clerks. But then with the statewide primary day being August 13th, that's when things really pick up. So we talked about that night. Clerks are in their offices sometimes till 1, 2 later in the morning. We're at our office till 1 or 2 until they're done, and we get the 247 results in for the election night results, and then with the official return of votes within 48 hours after the election. Then start the canvasses of the single town rep districts, then the Senate county multi-town rep districts, then the following Tuesday after the primary day, we have the statewide canvas, certify the results. We get the website with the results final.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that date?
Oh, sure. The statewide canvas is at 10 a.m. on the Tuesday after election day. So this
The 20th.
in 2024, it was the 20th.
Yeah.
And then we work on the turnout report, deeper election results, a lot of the information that goes out, going for the election archive, the information where you can look back at any of the elections for the last couple hundred years. We're getting that information loaded up into that archive. And at that same time, we're also collecting the tabulators from the tabulator towns and doing the work on uploading that information. At the same time, we're also continuing to do the work with independent candidates and minor party candidates that file. What isn't on here for most of the rows, but is important, so I did add it for the minor and independent party candidate filing deadline, which as of right now is the Thursday prior to election day. So this past year in 2024, when statewide primary day was Tuesday, August 13th, the Thursday prior was Thursday, August 8th. So that was the deadline for both minor parties and independent parties to file for all offices except president, which was August 1st.
Sorry, could you repeat that date again?
Sure. In 2024, it was Thursday, August 8th, that was the deadline for independent candidates and minor party candidates for all offices except president. For president, it was independent candidates had until August 1st to file. And where I added in that row, the yellow and the light orange was important because the difference between a party nominating a candidate and an independent is that when the party nominates the candidate, it's a relatively simple filing. They have their information, they make sure the name's on there, the consent of candidate and so forth. But you don't have the petitions. You don't have all the petition signatures. When it's an independent candidate, or for party candidates back in the spring when they're filing for the primary, you have that big stack of petitions. Those need to be reviewed. That was the other part of the bill. We had spoken about tightening that timeline under current law at 72 hours. We're proposing changing it to two business days. But that yellow review period here, if we had the 2 business days, would be from when the independent filings were due at the end of the day on Thursday, August 8th. 2 business days would be the end of the day on Monday, the 12th, the day before the primary election. But then if there's any issues, if those can't be accepted, if there's issues with the petitions, if they had them, some aren't legible or town names, things like that, our office in reviewing them has until that time, would be the end of the day on Monday, to notify the candidate that they had issues with their petition filing, and they're given 10 days to cure those petitions, to go out and get the proper signature. So that was the bar I just added on here, just to know that really when you add that 10 days in, you're looking up until potentially Thursday, August 22nd, that a candidate who filed on August 8th but had issues with their petition signatures, get them back, and then have a chance to go out and get adequate signatures. So potentially we wouldn't have the information needed to approve that candidate to be on the ballot until August 22nd. That's significant because where I put in red straight up and down, it wasn't purely on here, but the red row going across is the generating the ballot file for the general election that we send off for the ballot prep is really the key trigger for starting the general election, which we need for our universal vote by mail and those ballots that need to go out, into late September to meet the UOCAVA deadline 45 days in advance. And right after that to go out to every voter in the state. Yeah.
And I'm trying to follow that line up. Was that the 23rd?
Yeah, the red line going up was really Friday, the 23rd is really the line of when we need to have information set so that we can generate that ballot prep. Now you'll notice that there is one bar that goes across, and that's the last day for major parties to replace a withdrawn candidate. They have 7 days till after withdrawal. So under that is one area that presents a bit of a monkey wrench for a crunch time. That's arguably, both, as mentioned, the busiest time of the year for my team, with processing and certifying the August primary results and starting preparation for the general election. If a major party has a candidate withdraw, which they're allowed to do up till 10 days after the primary, that party can then replace that candidate. Fortunately, it doesn't happen too much, but it did happen. And when it does happen after that point, we have to then go to we've already been proofing the ballots. We have to go back, have them stop, make new proofs, make changes, which come at both a cost and a delay and just potentials for error and monkey wrench. So anything we can do to not add more probabilities of things happening after that August 23rd in this case is ideal.
We do have a question, Representative Cooper.
I do. So we took into consideration the tight timeline when we did this revision a year or so ago. In that period of time, I've noticed that I get mail maybe 2 or 3 days a week as opposed to 6. Last time, did we have a problem with people getting ballots late? And this time, are you anticipating it being worse? Right, it seems like a fairly tight calypso we're dealing with.
Yeah, so when you're saying mail, you're talking with the universal vote
Yeah.
mail and the UOCAVA. And certainly that was a piece we monitor. We heard a lot, from clerks. We did establish communications with the post office, with our regional rep. Secretary Copeland-Hansis was on calls with all the other Secretary of States and the Postmaster General and weighed in, but it absolutely is an issue, I think, as all of you know and hear from your constituents. I think the post office did make some strides in prioritizing election mail to be better or more reliable than other mail, but we heard stories of mail that people had mailed back. Clerks were telling us was showing up back in the winter that people had mailed in the fall. Not a lot of cases, but we certainly were hearing those cases, and we take them very seriously, and we escalate them to the Postmaster General and to the Secretaries of State and those sides. But I think to your point, yeah. So overall, mail is definitely a concern, and anything we can do to make sure that we are getting ballots out.
So there are forces outside this.
There are forces outside, yeah. I think, and I think in our prior testimony too, some of the pieces that we spoke about in the recommendations we made, such as extending the electronic ballot delivery to the safe at home participants. The reason behind that was that if everything was, if mail only took a day or two and we could mail something off and then it could even be rerouted through a post office box and they're in the military or overseas or in safe at home, that would be one thing, but that's not what's happening. So we really need every day we can have.
I had a question, which I think is easily answered, and then we have Rep. Boyden, and I don't know if we have anybody else, but my question is, how many independent candidates do you typically see that need to be printed on the ballot?
I think that's a question I have to get back on, just meaning across the board on and every.
Yeah, because I know it presents a problem, and Representative Sibilia brought that up, that she would be willing to negotiate on the date if that would help your timeline. So my question is really what's the amount of extra work that would cause you to have independent candidates that you would have to go back in and plug their name into the ballot? Correct. And I'm assuming it's all electronic, so you just have somebody input those names for those particular offices on the already made up ballot sheet.
I think the two pieces, one on the number, I'll get back to you today on that. I'll follow up to get from the last couple of elections where they have. As far as inputting it, it is more complicated than that. It is electronic on our side, but we work with multiple vendors. So we have one vendor that produces the ballot for the design that also is the contract we have with our tabulators. So they're making sure that the ballots are being designed in a way that they can be read by the tabulator towns. So when we make changes, we're having those into our system, the elections management system. We're then outputting a file that we send to that vendor. At the same time, we have files that go to the vendor that actually does the printing and mailing. So there are a whole number of steps along the way, and every time one change is made, yes, it's inputted right into our election management system, but with security and our team having it's entered into that system and then output as a file. So redone and sent to the information to the various vendors to make their changes, which could then come back to us to proof to make sure nothing else has changed. And I think for folks who have worked in the printing and editing, I don't understand it completely, but you make a change in one place and it triggers something else. So when there's a change to that ballot, you're proofing. You're not just saying, oh, okay, this one person's name is right as it was because maybe it tripped Washington to Wyndham and the top. So
In this situation, approximately what date would those start coming back from the vendors that you have to prove? Because it sounds like that's where the majority of the work is done, the time consuming work.
it is, yes. And I think so really on with this calendar here where we send off on that Monday, August 26th, so by that Friday 23rd are really tidying up all the electronic information on our side, shipping that file off first thing on the start of the week to the vendor. They take that time, most of that week really, to prepare vendor files, and they're coming back from the vendor that following usually that following Monday, right around Labor Day.
Okay. And one last question from me. Sorry to belabor this, but I'm trying to understand the timeline. When do you begin mailing out the ballots to households? Can you give me a date on this calendar when you did it last year?
Yeah, it would be if we extended the calendar over a couple weeks. It was right around the 20th, September 20th, within a day or so of that. And that was, the next set of proofs. So really in between those stages, you have both getting the proofs back from the vendor that's creating the ballots, proofing all of those to make sure they're correct, sending those ballots off to the print mail vendor who come up with their proofs of the whole package of what's being mailed out, come back to us. We proof all of their packages before okaying them to be mailed. So there's those couple weeks in early September are flat out with proofing those 283 ballot styles. And then they get mailed right around the September 20th. 283 ballot styles. There's 247 cities and towns, and then some towns have the multiple districts. So the 283 ballot styles.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next up was Representative Boyden, and then we have Rep. Cooper.
I think you kind of already answered my question. I just thinking with all the logistics involved, the 14th day following primary election doesn't really seem feasible. Then we're beyond this red line. So I was just thinking about maybe like 5 to 7 days following the primary. But as you just mentioned, there's a lot of moving pieces for.
Yeah. I think, even moving it any days past where it is, potentially runs it into when we would be needing to get those files to the printer. And so in addition to potentially having that change of cost, additional work, risk of error there, the second consideration to put was really that that's a pretty, one thing is the timeline of where it falls and kind of mechanically when things could work. The second piece is when staff kind of can have the capacity to review. And right now, as I mentioned, that time before the primary really is that calm before the storm. We've done our work with prepping the clerks and supporting them, getting a lot of calls, but relatively quieter compared to what happens on election day and beyond. So right when we're going to prove all the results of the canvas, even if you moved it to be, the day after the general primary, I mean, the statewide primary, one, you would be pushing the opportunity to cure out into after when we need to get the file to the design vendor. But secondly, our team is flat out preparing for the statewide canvas, supporting clerks on the representative canvas, county canvas, certifying results. So adding another load of reviewing and going through petitions that week after the primary would be backbreaker.
Okay, thank you, Representative Cooper.
I just want to make sure that we pick up what was said, that in this sphere of what's happening, it's not only happening across the street, it's also happening with vendors who probably don't have somebody sitting at the desk just waiting for Vermont's changes. And it's the busiest time of year for those people too. Every state and territory is getting a ballot in, so that the longer we do that, the more we enhance the opportunity for something to go south.
Representative Waters Evans.
Thanks. Can you explain why independent candidates don't just file on the same day as the party candidates?
Sorry to say state law being the short answer, no, but I don't mean to be glib with that. I
was curious if it's, because we keep talking about moving it before or moving it after, and what if it were the same day? Would that be still an added burden, or?
Just to understand, right, you mean if statewide, if independent candidates file back in the spring, when is that what you? I mean, certainly it wouldn't be a huge burden on our side from that side. I think probably the argument for having it be later is just to allow for more ballot access. I mean, everything, I think all of the dates, as I understand, are really set up to be as late as they can without breaking things, really. And so, the reason why the party candidates have to file in the spring is that deadline is right up against, the same crunch we're talking about here. We do in the end of May and early June, trying to get those ballots prepped out to the ballot designer in order to meet the UOCAVA deadline at the end of June for the August deadline. We got to get all of those ballots in the mail by the end of June then, which pushes back the state. And that's the primary reason why statewide candidates have to file, back when they do. So I think the rationale, and again, I wasn't in the seat when that date was set, but my understanding or read of it is that date in early August is as late as it can go to still allow time to be on the November ballot without breaking things.
I guess it seems like the argument for changing the date to after would be to allow independent candidates to run if they didn't like the primary candidates. But also they have a lot of time still after. I'm not asking you to weigh in on it. I'm just processing.
I mean, I think I won't and leave it off. I think one thing to point out is just also on this calendar is that, candidates do have the opportunity to withdraw. So if there was a candidate who maybe was in that boat of feeling like maybe I want to run if it's only these candidates on the ballot for this office, but I don't want to run if it's, candidates X and Y, they could file by that deadline. And then if candidates A and B are on the ballot and they decide, oh, I don't want to run, they have that time after the primary to withdraw. And under the current say, so I think that would be the current mechanism for running against somebody you won't want to run against and not against somebody you don't.
Thank you. Representative Hooper has another question.
I'm glad that that question came up because in prior testimony, Representative Sebelia said specifically, I might not like the person who won the primary and then I'll run again. That would seem to be an option right in campaign, but it's sort of weird. Normally, we have candidates who run for an office, not against another candidate to some degree.
Thank you. Any additional questions before we move on to our next witness? Okay, thank you very much for being here.
Welcome.
We'll continue this discussion.
Great. Thank you.
And our next witness is Chelsea McGuire from Orange County. The clerk who is I forget your exact title, Director of the Vermont Municipal Clerks and Treasurers Associations? Or President?
I'm the chair of the legislative
Chair.
committee of
Thank you.
the Vermont Municipal Clerks and Treasurers Association, yes.
Thank you very much for joining us. And I assume you're going to give us the clerk's perspective on the Sebelia amendment that was offered to us.
Yes, thank you for inviting us back on this. I really don't have a whole lot to add. Director Sheehan explained the process and the logistics way more thoroughly than I could. Really all we have to add to that is that the week or so following an election, clerks are extremely busy. A lot of candidates don't file their petitions in the clerk's offices, though. They file them with the Secretary of State's office. However, the transition from the primary to the general election is like no time. There's like really no wiggle room for the clerks. And so we rely heavily during that period on the Secretary of State's Elections Division for guidance, for maybe there's some training that's needed, for information, and anything additional added to their plate, because they are a small office and they do a great job and they do everything they can for us. Anything additional added to their plate during that time could potentially impact our preparations for the election.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Did you want to add something to that or take questions at this point?
I can take questions. That's really all we had to add to that.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for the Clerks Association? Representative Cooper.
I'm supposed to go up for a transportation introduction. Do you anticipate a vote soon?
No. I think we will wait for our chair to come back. And that is an unknown time frame at this moment. Everybody's busy going here, there, and everywhere for testimony. I guess one thing I would ask from you, because you're not here in the building frequently, so we may not get a chance to ask you this. If this deadline for independence would be changed, would you have a recommendation of when it would what it would change to, with the understanding that it used to be not long ago a different date? And perhaps you experienced that as a clerk when it was a different filing date. So would you comment on that?
Our recommendation as an association, and I don't have information on this from the association, except that the earlier, the better. So I know that 14 days isn't a whole lot of time, but it could be just enough time to interfere with the elections division, like Director Sheehan was discussing. So really our recommendation would just be the earlier, the better.
Okay, and I'll ask a follow-up to that, since Representative Boyden threw out a number. How does 7 days after the election sound to you in comparison to 14?
I believe that our association would be amenable to that.
Okay, thank you very much for weighing in on that without us asking you ahead of time to think about that, because I'm sure you could have done a poll and it would have been a little more scientific. and I appreciate you being willing to be put on the spot. Do you have a question, Representative Waters Evans?
Yeah, you asked it.
Oh, like minds think
I
alike.
know.
Any other questions for the Clerks and Treasurers Association? Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us again this morning. It's good to see you.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from the table? Questions? Representative Coffin?
No, you said comments and
Comments?
you had brought up, because the question with the 7 days. And that's where I had already marked on my paper where I was looking at things because that would give the review time for that. And it would only bleed over into that extended time where if a candidate withdrew to where they would have to get that name on the ballot. So from the 7 days, they would still have that same amount of time to review those petitions and still get it on the ballot because it would still fall within a couple of days of when the cutoff would be for replacing a candidate.
So these are good things to think about. We have 8 minutes until our next witness when we're going to shift gears completely and talk about miscellaneous cannabis amendments. So maybe we'll just take a quick break and be back at 10:15. Adam?